let's talk a little shop review edition. We are going to talk about our classroom a little bit, talk about some of our tools. Our main goal and focus this year is for you to learn a little bit about some of these tools, be able to identify what they are and the operations that they perform. And hopefully when you walk out of here, you'll be a little more comfortable and a little more understanding of how equipment works and some of the things that we have for you to use. So let's talk about these. We'll start back here in the back, kind of front corner. We know that these are our metal vices. We use these for a lot of different things. The metal ones are, you can tell by these jaws and by these imprints in here, and they're going to hold that material down. We have our wood burners, which we've used several times. This is our spot welder, which we talked just a little bit about. These two tools here are super important to our classroom. These are our drill presses. A lot of you are pretty common in understanding the way a drill works. But in this case, we have the drill press, so we press the bit down into the material. We always make sure we have a piece of scrap wood underneath it so it doesn't drill into the table. We always make sure we clamp the material down using the clamp. The bit is held in what we call the chuck, and then to change the bit, we use the chuck key to do that. Rule of thumb when using the drill press is if the bit is large, then we go really, really slow. If the bit is small, we can go much faster. So a little bit about the drill presses. Here we have a couple C-clamps. Notice the shape of those. Pretty simple there. Now let's come over here and talk about some other things that we use this year. These are just a common quick grip clamp. You saw those a little bit. Here we have the brad nailer. The brad nailer is run by compressed air or pneumatic driven, meaning it runs by compressed air. So there's a compressor that loads up and shoots those little tiny brads. Those brads are really, really small. In this case, we use those to help hold our stool together, but we also want to kind of hide them so we don't see them very well. We use this a lot in trim and mop boards and things in your house. You saw us use this a little bit. This is a dead blow hammer. So inside it's filled inside here and then it doesn't bounce back up. So you kind of hear the term dead blow hammer. So then we have a standard handsaw. We have two different types of common screwdrivers. We have a flathead, which you can see here. And then we have a Phillips head screwdriver, which is the little star. We have a couple different types of drill bits that we'll talk about. This is the Forstner bit, which we used on our stool project. This is just a common twist drill. This one here, we talked a little bit about. We didn't really use it, I don't think. This is our hole saw. These are pretty common when using the drill press. These are just standard Allen wrenches, standard set of pliers, needle nose pliers from the pointed ends, and then, of course, the hot glue gun, which you understand a little bit about. We have several different types of jigsaws, also called scroll saws. We know that the teeth are pointed downward on them. So if we looked at them really, really closely, we use these little fingers to help hold the material down. One of the main things when using the jigsaw or the scroll saw, we never push from directly behind. We never want to put our hands anywhere in front of the blade. In this case, the the table is 360 degrees. It does not move. We move the material around to make the cuts that we need. Pretty simple there. It is variable speed as well. We do have a grinding wheel, which we didn't really use, and it's not going to be on your test. These are lathes, which also were not on your test. This year we used pine the entire time. Pine is a type of wood. We know pine from pine trees. Pine is also classified as what we call a softwood. It's a conifer, which means it's an evergreen. It bears needles compared to a deciduous tree or a tree that loses its leaves. So trees that you'd be familiar with would be something like an oak tree, maple tree, ash, black walnut, cherry, those types of trees. Those are all hardwoods and are also called deciduous. One of our super important tools in our classroom is our table saw. It gets its name from its nice flat surface with the blade coming out of it, so hence the name table saw. A couple of things that'll be on your test that'll be important. Notice that the blade is round. The blade spins back this direction towards the user. So we also have this called the fence, which runs parallel with the blade. In this case, it's this yellow color, but what also does exactly what a fence does. It holds material back a certain distance from the blade. You've seen me use this a lot. This is the push stick. We use this so our fingers or hands are not anywhere near the blade when we're using them. This is also called the miter slide here. This is for cutting angles. We didn't use that a lot this year. This is a feather board, which you don't have to worry about, and another type of push stick. Underneath it, we have the dust collector that collects the dust from underneath here and connects to a lot of the tools and takes the dust outside of the classroom into barrels outside. It is pretty loud, but it is something that does keep the air a little bit cleaner in our classroom. We have two band saws. We have this larger one and then the one that's up front by the router table. In this case, we'll talk a little bit about the bandsaw, just a couple things I want you to take note of. The bandsaw has one continuous blade or one continuous band, and it spins in this direction down. The blade goes through here, down, across the bottom, back up, and one continuous band, sort of like a bike chain running between it. The blade on the bandsaw are always pointed downward, and again, our hands are always on the side and never behind, pushing towards the blade. One of our common tools that we use a ton this year is our miter saw or chop box or chop saw. What I want you to know here is always remember that we push the material back against the fence. Your left hand is always your holder. Your right hand is always your drive hand. We always go nice and slow, making sure the material is tight against the fence. The blade spins backwards or away from the user, pushing the material against the fence when it makes its cut. Just know which hands are supposed to do what. This is our disc belt combo. We use this quite a bit as well, knowing that the disc has a directional property, meaning we always sand on the downside. Same thing with the belt portion. We're always sanding on the downside. We use the table as our guide or our resistance to make sure the material stays nice and straight. This is our spindle sander. We talked just a little bit about these. We didn't use these a ton. The spindle sander just has sandpaper come out of this round surface, and that allows us to sand stuff on the inside of something if we need to get inside here. This is our panel saw. We didn't use that a lot either, so you won't have anything on that on your test. Most of the stuff that we have on your test will be things that you talk about. This is our planer. The planer allows the material to go to regulate the thickness of the material. Also won't have a ton on your test. This is our joiner. Our joiner allows us to join multiple pieces together. There's just one question on your test about that. This is the other miniature bandsaw that we have. Same properties. It has this band or this blade that goes down here. This is our router table, which you are familiar with if you've watched the video like you were supposed to. It also has a directional property. We also go in this direction, in the feed direction, and we feed it against the cutting surface, which supplies us our control. If we travel over here, we have our sanding area, and we have several different types of sanders. We have our vibrating sanders, and we have our random orbital sanders. Remember, sandpaper is classified by its grit. We always make sure we wear our safety glasses at all times. We have our sandpaper. Sandpaper is classified by its grit. We look on the back to find those numbers. So we look inside here and we see this is an 80 grit sandpaper. And we know that the lower the number, the rougher the sandpaper. So if we sand down here, it's going to be rough, but it's going to get us to that smooth surface eventually. And then we move all the way up to the 280 and 300 grit, which is going to give us that super, super smooth surface. We have several different types of patterns that we've used this year. We've also used these files to remove some of our material for our boat. We know that when we use any type of portable drill, that a drill can go forward and backwards. It can go in reverse. So we want to be able to remember that and know that. It's a pretty common tool that we use quite a bit. So when you take your test, then you're going to make sure that you remember all the different types of tools and equipment and how they work. Remember, when we're cutting, when we cut with the grain, we call that ripping. So think about that. So when you're ripping with the grain, when you're cutting across the grain, like you're cutting with a chop saw, we call that cross cutting, okay? And that makes sense. We know that, I'm gonna make sure that we don't forget anything that you may need. Spindle, joiner, dust collector, always wear your glasses, work on the downside. We should talk about a hammer real quick. I'll talk about that real fast, and a couple different things that we have. We have our wooden mallet, which you're familiar with in the video for our stool project. The rubber mallet, same thing. And the one I really want you to remember is a standard claw hammer, and that of course gets its name from this claw portion on the back. Know the directions of the material that when we make cuts, which way do we put the material into the blade, make sure we lock things down, identify the tools, know what they look like, and that'll be all that will be on your test. So hopefully you do well. Be a visual person and think about the things that we're asking you on the test. The test will be on the computer, but also you may take and watch this video several times if you need to prepare for that test, because almost everything that we talked about will end up being on that test. So today's video is sponsored by Crystal Clear, Ultra Clear, Premium Bond Glue, or glue sticks. As you notice, we use these a ton this year. Without a sponsor like this, we would have a hard time enjoying the use of the multi-purpose hot glue guns. Good luck.